Penguins made a big trade today, acquiring Derek Brassard from the Ottawa Senators, trading away Ian Cole, Philip Gustafson, and their first-round draft pick next year. And to talk about that trade, we have Dejan Kovacevic of course, DK Pittsburgh Sports. How you doing, Dejan?
All right, Dale. Been a little busier than I expected for the last hour.
Yeah, this whole thing kind of threw me off too. I wasn't expecting to be talking. I knew I would be talking hockey today. I didn't know that I would be talking about a major trade for the Penguins.
Yeah, well, I think some of the pieces started to fall last night with the Rangers moving Michael Grabner. And the thing with Derek Brassard is that he was the top prize among centers on the NHL trade market, actually by a really wide margin. It's not a great it hasn't been a great trade market at that position, and I think that was what had concerned Jim Rutherford and his staff. Was they said, look, we're either going to get this guy or we might not do anything at all. And that bugged them because then they saw, and I say this with respect, not to be snarky, but that they saw that they were going to enter the playoffs with Carter Rowney as their fourth center. And what scared them the most about that, Dale, wasn't that, Rowney is some terrible fourth-line center. It's that they felt that they no longer had that guy who could slide up and replace Crosby and or Malkin when needed. Remember how Matt Collin and Nick Bonino would do that almost effortlessly?
Yeah, I mean that seemed to be something that they really needed to do, was acquire some depth down the roster here at that position in particular.
Yeah.
At the same time, they kind of weakened themselves at the blue line, didn't they?
Yes. I was about to hesitate, and then I just realized that deserved a firm yes. Ian Cole had been playing so well. Ian Cole is a better defenseman in every way, shape, or form than Matt Hunwick is. That said, they think that there's been more there to Hunwick's game than what he's shown. There's a reason they put out the $6.75 million over 3 years for Hunwick as a free agent last summer. They think he's a better player. I'm not so sure about that. I haven't liked his positioning in particular in his own end. I think he's a little lost at times. That's really concerning when it gets to playoffs, and one silly mistake can cost you a game or even a series. But if Matt Hunwick is your number 6 and Chad Ruhwedel is your number 7 and can come in when someone else gets hurt, you're not exactly desperate at the position. So it was more a position of depth than anything they had to offer up front.
Now, Dejan, of course, we're talking with Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports here on the Adam Crowley Show, where I'm Dale Lolley sitting in for Crowley. But Dejan, one thing that I think this team was already set up to make a deep run into the playoffs, whether they had made this trade or not. Does this trade put them over the top?
No, I don't think I don't think that any trade was going to put a team that's heading into its third championship type run over the top, because there's so many variables. There's a reason, Dale, that nobody had even won 2 in a row in the NHL for 20 years. I remain stunned to this day that the Penguins did it twice, particularly not having Chris Letang. I think that if they do it a third time, it would be beyond astronomical belief, based on not only in the NHL, but what we see all around sports. There just aren't dynasties anymore. There's salary caps. There's a fatigue factor. There's more games than ever. There's more demands than ever. The game is more physical because the players are bigger and faster than ever. So I don't know that there's an over-the-top move to be had. Jim Rutherford's mindset, and I can tell you this unequivocally from having talked to the man on this subject for months now, his mindset was that he just wanted to give them the best chance. He wanted to create a roster that would at least afford the best opportunity, and he had hoped to do that without giving up, all of the team's future. And if you look at the trade itself, Cole was going to leave as an unrestricted free agent. Philip Gustafson looks like a wonderful goalie. At 19 years old, he just helped Sweden to the World Junior Championship. But at the same time, the Penguins have the 2 youngest goalies in the league, at least as a tandem, in Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry, so they didn't need him there. And let's not forget this, too. Weren't we all kind of accepting that Daniel Sprong was going to go in this deal?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe they go ahead and trade him for a defenseman now and kind of really shore things up on the back end. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, if Jim has one move left in him, I think it would be where he would send Connor Sherry out because, again, we're talking about salary cap hell. This is like salary cap hell to the 10th degree, what they're in now. So any deal they make has to be one in which Connor Sherry goes out because of the $3 million that he's due each of the next 3 years. And that's not – what are you doing then, Dale? Like, you're sending Sherry out for Sherry. You're gonna move him for a winger, and Sherry already knows everything. You can trust him. He's been a champion. He scored big goals in the playoffs. I would not be surprised if Jim's done.
Okay, we're talking to Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Dejan, on today's site on the website, you had a big story on our Insider on the Pitt job and what's going on over at Pitt. Obviously, they have a big game tomorrow against Virginia, a big game in terms of it being their last home game of the season, and there's some trouble brewing over on Cardiac Hill, is there not?
Well, I guess it depends on your perspective as to what constitutes trouble or bad or good. I mean, the sentiment is so strongly aligned against Kevin Stallings and the work that he's done, not just with the fan base. You covered the game Wednesday night, and you saw there wasn't even an Oakland Zoo. It
was barely a menagerie of 20 students.
It was like it was like the giraffe as opposed to the entire zoo. There's nowhere to go with that project. I don't think Heather Lyke in the administration can look people in the eye after a season like this and say, you know what, let's give him another year. It just doesn't make sense, not financially, not otherwise. They got to buy him out, and that was what the crux of my reporting was today, is that they can look at ways, and they are looking at ways where they can say, okay, he did this wrong or this wrong as a basketball coach per the contract, so let's talk about a reduction here. Stallings is in his late 50s. I think he'd be crazy to turn down a buyout of, let's say, $5 million as opposed to $10 million. So it's a reasonable discussion to be had. Plus, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, you were there the other night. Did that not sound like a defeated man on his way out?
He did. He very much did. And I had been in his corner for much of this season in terms of, hey, you got to give the guy a chance. You can't just cut bait. This was going to be tough. I was on record before the season started saying that they would struggle to win 10 games this year, and they have. That being said, I thought that the cupboard was left pretty bare by Jamie Dixon. There wasn't a lot there, and then when Cam Johnson went ahead and transferred before the season started, then you lose Ryan Luther. Now, Ryan Luther's not a star player, and he's not somebody that you build your team around, but I thought that really hurt them in terms of on-the-floor leadership. And I just don't see any of that there right now. And that's not on Kevin Stallings necessarily because he's not on the floor. And as he said, look, I can coach these guys up, and we can go over these things. But when they get on the floor, it's them. And that's the one thing that's missing with this team. There's just nothing there in terms of leadership.
Well, yeah, and leadership, as you have pointed out yourself in our conversations on this, comes first and foremost from talent, and there's really none of that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Jared Wilson, frame, and then there's not much else out there on that floor. Marcus Carr, too, I guess.
I see some flashes from some of the young guys, but I don't see any of those guys developing into a future star.
No,
a future number one guy.
Marcus Carr, yeah, you'll see it from Shamil Stevenson. You're not going to see a ton on a nightly basis. You and I disagree 180 degrees on this Jamie and the cupboard thing. Jamie left him with two of the top scorers in the ACC and Mike Young and Jamel Arden.
That's last year's argument. Okay, I get that.
I know.
I get that. But those guys were going to be gone. Now, you can say that Stallings didn't do a better job of replacing them, and that I can agree with.
That actually is kind of a point. And he did have Cam Johnson there, and he didn't keep him. That's obviously not entirely on the coach. Cam makes up his own mind. He was the one that decided to transfer.
Yeah, and he graduated early. That's the NCAA rules. They allow for that.
Yeah,
and there's nothing you can do about it.
However, what we have here in our city is a pretty stark contrast right down Fifth Avenue as to how you can turn something around overnight by going out and getting junior college kids, by recruiting well, and that's what Keith Dambrot has done at Duquesne. And I think if it wasn't for Duquesne, I don't think you would see anywhere near the angst at Pitt over what Stallings was unable or unwilling, or however you'd want to put it, to do in that same time span that Duquesne went and found all this talent. People don't even realize, Dale, the Dukes, their best talent isn't even on the floor yet. These transfers who've had to sit out this year, by all accounts, are better than the starters they've got. So the guy's done a great job.
As of late, anybody would be better than the starters they've put on
the floor.
I
know.
They've kind of stumbled. They've been better this year than most Duquesne teams.
Absolutely,
have been.
and they played really well recently against both St. Bonaventure and Rhode Island in losses, and those are both teams that are, the best in that conference.
Sure.
I'm just saying that
they're not the laughing stock that they were.
No, if Dambrot
comes,
let's put it this way: if Dambrot comes in and follows Jim Ferry with a 3-24 record and 1-15 in the A10, nobody says a word,
right?
Because he would have had all the excuses, and all we heard from Pitt is excuses, and all we saw from Duquesne were results.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. And of course, we're talking to Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. I'm Dale Lolley. You're listening to 970 ESPN. Dejan, just to switch things up one more time, the Pirates, the Pirates getting into the business of acquiring some talent here over the last few days. Do you like the moves that they pulled off here, going out and basically adding 3 outfielders, one of whom they've already named their starter in left field?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Dickerson stands out above the other 2 pretty significantly. I mean, and not just because, they put in their headline in the email that they sent out, all-star, Chris Dickerson. Well, Jeff Block was an all-star too. In Dickerson's case,
Neil Heaton was an all-star.
Oh boy, way to drop it! I'll turn that into an Evan Meek bomb on your head there. How's that? They did the right thing. I mean, they went out and they got a player. They got him for literally nothing, and by that I mean sending Daniel Hudson out, who was a massive.
That's actually a win. I mean, that just getting rid of Hudson, getting somebody to take Hudson off your hands is a win.
Yeah, and so it was even revenue neutral. It was baseball neutral, so it's a no-risk move. That said, I haven't seen this pop up in a whole lot of descriptions of this trade, but the Rays had Dickerson designated for assignment, and you don't DFA someone unless you've already tried very, very hard to move them. So they couldn't even find somebody to take him off their hands because of his second half, the nosedive that he had. He still occasionally hit some home runs at the Trop, but he saw his strikeouts go way up. He was missing contact and also wasn't getting as lucky in his contact in the second half. And look, if he has a first half like the one he has last season, and somehow Jeff Branson and the Pirates coaching staff can find a way to lock him into it, make him comfortable, put him into positions where he can succeed against certain pitchers, then you might have something. And maybe that, Dale, is the reason that they went and got a couple of other outfielders, because maybe they would be looking at a platoon. They don't like to use the word, but they don't mind actually applying the concept. And I think you could see a situation where Dickerson would line up against righties. Most of the NL Central is right-handed. So then you could put in somebody else to face lefties and maybe give the guy a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I mean, you're still going to want to get Adam Frazier in the lineup on a regular basis, even though he's not the power hitter, but he certainly gives you some options there. I thought when they started acquiring outfielders, I thought that was kind of precipitating maybe a Harrison trade.
Yeah, you know what? I really think that these guys have been kind of freaked out by this public reaction. I think it's finally happened. They've finally gotten embarrassed, that they finally found a little bit of shame. And what's freaking them out, I can promise you, more than anything, isn't a baseball thing or isn't what they hear on radio shows like this or social media. It's the seas and seas of empty seats that are showing up on these ticket scans, including the opener. Have you seen that?
I have not, but I can imagine.
Oh, my goodness. Box seats, just entire sections are wide open for the opener. That's scary stuff, And I think at some point you just realize, look, I mean, we can send out Josh Harrison and we're going to replace him with Max Moroff, and this is only going to get worse. At some point or other, you just have to say, look, enough's enough.
Well, it doesn't seem to be bothering the Rays, though. The Rays have basically dumped everybody they've had of any kind of value.
Well, the Rays never sold any tickets in the first place.
Well, there's that too. I mean, same thing with Miami. I mean, the teams down there they've dumped, but they've also. I mean, you're talking about teams that have they've dumped but contended at times. They've contended more consistently than the Pirates.
Yeah, this is a separate subject. There really shouldn't be Major League Baseball anywhere in the state of Florida. They just don't. People there are really, really attached to the spring training fun, going out to those ballparks, and then you go to these big indoor caverns that the Marlins and the Rays have, and nobody's interested. It's just a bad idea. Get them out of there. Put the Expos back in Montreal, for crying out loud.
There you go. That's an idea. He is Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Dejan, I appreciate your time. We got to let you go here at the top of the hour, but of course you can read Dejan at DK Pittsburgh Sports as well as myself, and we're bringing you a lot of good stuff here. Dejan, of course, will be at the Pitt game tomorrow night. We got Penguins coverage tonight. And of course, lots of stuff happening here again before the trade deadline. Maybe the Penguins are done, maybe they're not, but we'll see how that works out. We'll be talking to you down around the line here, Dejan.
Thanks, Dale.